Electricast.
Introducing Royal Caribbean's newest ship, Icon of the Seas, the ultimate family vacation. The ultimate 6 slides, 8 neighborhoods, 0 compromise vacation. The ultimate never done that, can't wait to do it vacation. The ultimate chillin' by a different pool every day of the week vacation. This is the Icon of Vacations. Icon of the Seas, arriving in 2024. Book today. Come seek the Royal Caribbean. Ships Registry, Bahamas.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, you are about to listen to the most entertaining and informative wrestling podcast out there. That is not a prediction, it is a spoiler, and this is KAYFABE Critics.
Welcome into KAYFABE Critics on Missing the Point. I am DK Sizzle, joined by Marcangelo. I'm so excited to be doing this show. As everybody knows, I geek out about the wrestling shows. I'm always honored to be asked to do them. I asked Mike to let me sort of lead the dance because it occurred to me in sort of a moment of inspiration today that we really never talked about the Undertaker retiring at length. What I would consider sort of the biggest thing to happen in wrestling for many years, him finally leaving. And I think there was a lot of, there was documentaries that came out. There was like a lot of coverage of it. It was, it was done, I thought, this time well, as opposed to the last time they tried to do it. But I think, now that all that's settled down, I think we can have sort of a, State of the Union type discussion about The Undertaker, where he ranks for you, for me, for the outside world. What was great about him, what maybe sort of fell short, and like, I'd love to just go through, just as a credit to him existing in wrestling, just go through some of the big matches and talk about like kind of our perspectives on it, mainly your perspectives on it, Mike, because I think his 3 biggest matches are against Shawn Michaels. So let's just get right into it. I'd like to start off right off the top. There's a lot of GOAT conversation around Undertaker. I would say it's probably the most hotly contested GOAT subject in wrestling right now. If you're on any forum, there's one comment underneath like anything about like who's the best, like, dude, look at the numbers, Taker, this, the streak, et cetera, et cetera. Where is he on your list? And just give us your top 5. And if he's in there, great. If not, we'll have to talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, the top 5 for me, because I think you have to take into consideration like the in-ring work, like their abilities, their drawing power. Number 1, Shawn Michaels. I mean, I've always been a Shawn Michaels fan. We know about that. Number 2 is Stone Cold Steve Austin, just because of the impact that he had on the business for as short of a time relative to, Taker that he was in it. 3 is Taker. 4 is The Rock. 5 is Bret the Hitman Hart.
Wow. Well, I'm so glad he could squeak in there for you, Mike.
But I mean, if you think about those 5, those are, and you notice that Hogan's not in my top 5, and he could be the greatest wrestler or superstar of all time. But all 5 of those people, they could draw, they could talk, and they could wrestle. And I think Taker is by far, I mean, he's the greatest big man of all time, but I think that's a cop-out because there aren't that many great big men. So for him not to be in anybody's top 5 or at least top 10, I think it's blasphemous.
Sure. But I mean, don't you think there's sort of a consensus hot take sort of going around in the wrestling community that he's number 1 and should be number 1 on everybody's list? And like, do you dispute? I mean, apparently you do, because he's 3 for you.
Yeah, I dispute that. That's like, just to make this relative for anyone that maybe not be a wrestling fan, but just listen to this because they automatically downloaded it. It's like, it's the Carl Yastrzemski argument for the Red Sox, right? Like he played there for 65 fucking years, but he's not the greatest. He was just around the longest. Taker happened to be, he came in at the end of the 80s, really where we thought was the golden age of wrestling. And then he weathered through the storm of the early 90s into the Attitude Era. But if you look at it, he had great matches, great feuds, and great moments in every single one of the eras that he was a part of. I do think that the reason why he's not my number one is just because I think Shawn's a better wrestler, and I think Austin was a bigger pop culture icon and influence in professional wrestling. I mean, that's it.
I mean, all that's pretty fair. I have him at 3 as well, but my top 5 is actually very different than yours otherwise. which makes a lot of sense. What I do like about your top 5, though, and I think that it's part of the reason Taker gets sort of knocked down to 3, is you've always banged the drum of great champions are also vulnerable champions. Like, great champions need to put other people over. They need to lose at the right time. They need to have these kind of redemption arcs. And I think with Taker, apart from the ascension after he loses to Yokozuna, I don't really remember any great, like, huge vulnerable moments for him. I think that you can level that criticism at Taker, but even more so like a Hulk Hogan. And it makes sense why he doesn't make your top 5. It makes sense probably why Brett's 5 for you, because I think that you hold that quality with fairly, to tell a story, there has to be ups and downs. Like, this is kind of what we're doing here. And I think the less vulnerable champions, I think, do fall down your list, because my top 5 is Brett 1, obviously. I mean, we've litigated this already. Just scroll back in the in the episodes. We've litigated this to death. HBK number 2, Taker 3 for all the same reasons. Stone Cold Steve Austin 4, and Hulk Hogan 5. So okay. I think the vulnerability thing to me means a little bit less than impact, and I think. If I have Stone Cold at number 4, Brett's number 1 credibility actually goes up, because I think he did a lot to put Stone Cold where he is. But that, because we're talking about the Undertaker, that same argument can be made for Taker with Shawn Michaels. I think that if it's not for those 3 bouts between those guys, they elevate each other. But I think, like, what Shawn does for his size, being a high flyer, does for the Undertaker, and like what makes him good in actual matches. Like, forget the character. Taker was better at wrestling smaller guys. Like, he just was, I mean, he had great rivalries with Kane, which we'll get into, but as far as the actual technical wrestling goes, I think he was just so much better with high flyers. And it's part of the reason that myth sort of exists, right? That stereotype sort of exists, where, like, it's a better match if you put the guys of adjacent size next to each other.
Right. Yeah. And you can see that too, because early on in his career, he was going up against, statues and fossils, like Jimmy Superfly Snuka, King Kong Bundy, Jake the Snake, freaking Giant Gonzalez. Like, I think that was just an internal rib on him. But when you saw him, I think I don't count Yokozuna as a big man, only because he could just move. Now, he happened to be large, but he could move. But the first big man that he fought that I believed, and there was actually an entertaining match, was, Diesel at WrestleMania 12. It's a good match. And Kevin Nash wasn't known for having good matches. So when you saw that, okay, well, he could deal with the small guys, all the big guys can. But now, to your point, you get into Diesel. Sid at 13 was okay. I probably one of Sid's best matches. But then Kane, I mean, him and Kane had a 16-year rivalry that they could just tap into whenever they wanted. Yeah. And that's a testament to Taker, but also how good Kane also was in the ring.
Yeah, I agree. I think that elevated Kane's character too, because when Taker showed up, it was you remember the announcement of SummerSlam, right? Where he comes in, or was it WrestleMania 7? Was his first match against Jimmy Duca?
Taker's first match was Survivor Series 1990.
Right. That's it.
His first WrestleMania match was against Superfly, yeah.
Right, against Superfly, right. Who couldn't fucking move at all. And, like, that's not a great match, but what is cool about it is Taker walking in and then being like, what is this guy, like 350 pounds? What is he, like 6'10"? They're, like, all guessing his weight and his height, and they're like, look at the fucking size of him. And he is picking up Jimmy Duca, He's throwing him around a good amount. There's one good moment.
You do that on purpose? You do that on purpose?
What?
Duca?
Yeah, I mean, isn't that how you say his name? Am I saying it wrong? Am I doing an email?
Snuka.
Oh, yeah. Why am I saying Duca? Dude, I've been doing this with wrestling names. I called Hacksaw Jim Duggan fucking pins Jim Duggan for like years. I don't know why I keep fuck up wrestling names. Superfly Snuka. There's one great move where Taker ducks like a dive from him and he goes right over the ropes, but he doesn't quite make it. And he like bounces on the ropes and then like falls back over. But he does the first tombstone against him, right?
Yep.
So like you see that move, but there's another criticism people level at Taker, that his moves didn't change enough over the course of that billion-year career, So you have guys like that, and then eventually, yes, you get him. You start to get him rivalries. His first match against Kane, was that the first ever Hell in a Cell?
No, it was WrestleMania 14 in Boston. I mean, they've been teasing it. That's when. So Kane showed up at Hell in a Cell in '97, right?
That's right. Yeah.
I think it was Bad Blood or Mind Game. It was one of those in your houses. And then Taker went through, I think it's 4 or 5 months where he vowed to never lay a hand on his brother. Right? They did a really good job building that storyline, and then it ultimately after he broke Shawn Michaels' back at Royal Rumble 1998, and they put him in the casket, they lit it on fire, and then in Boston 14, and you really didn't know what.
Were you there?
No. Only because I was 10. I was going to be 10 at the time. I had a suspicion that Shawn was going to lose, and I couldn't deal with being there in person for that. So, but you have that match though. You don't really know. Like, Taker can do. Kane was Isaac Yankem for his first run in WWE. There were no 5-star matches there, but that's where the storyline actually elevated the in-ring. It made you so invested in that, and they capitalized on that. And I think, there's Shawn, there's Mankind, but we're not talking about Undertaker the way that we are right now, if not for Kane.
Yeah, I had that written down. I wanted to go, and I think that's a good time to transition into it. I want to talk about the people that elevated him, because I think that obviously the Kanes of the world, I think the pallbearer character, and I think the way that they weaved that into the storyline, one of the early moments of them weaving it into the storyline of the behind the scenes of the WWF at the time, where it's like, oh, there's like all this weird dark art stuff going on. And he's, and he played a great character as well, like the way they had, and the way that the whole betrayal goes down with Kane in the first place, where it's like he turns his back and he can't get the urn, and the urn, they do that great gag with the urn with all the green stuff coming out. It's like the betrayal. And then he's pallbearer's on Kane's team for like the remainder. And it's like all this drama. It's like, it's the opera of it at its finest. And I think that elevates Undertaker's character further, because you're kind of with him through this whole like supernatural, betrayal, brothers, father, like all this kind of like high-minded operatic storyline that brings you through. And it does sort of cover up, I think, a little bit some of his technical inefficiencies early on. And I think he's a little bit like lucky to be elevated to that point. Would you agree or would you disagree? Or do you think it was maybe partners until before Kane?
So I do think that Taker gets a little bit of a bad rep for his early run in the 90s or in WWE for being slow and methodical, but that's what they wanted him to be, right?
Lurking, this Frankenstein character that they had going for him at first, yeah.
At the drop of a dime, he could move quickly. He would do that over the head clothesline, the old school. Like, he could move fast. But to your actual question, I think that in the 90s, there were only three people that made Taker vulnerable. It was Yokozuna, it was Mankind, Mick Foley, and it was Kane. You did not know, based on how the feuds went, how he was going to do, and it actually crossed your mind that he could lose. For Yoko, just a big guy, athletic, and it's believable that a 480-pound man can beat a 320-pound man. Like, that's fair.
Mm-hmm.
Foley comes in, and he's ripping his hair out. He's having boiler room brawls, buried alive matches, and nothing that Taker does to him will kill him. I mean, when he appeared on Raw the night after WrestleMania, and he put the mandible claw in Taker, they had like the little foam coming out of his mouth. That was pretty fucking wild. That's the first time that you'd seen Taker like that. And then for Kane, all the same things. He was the same size. And there was this great storyline where Taker did not want to hurt his brother because he already thought that he did him a disservice by leaving him in the funeral parlor that was their home and when it burned. Like, that is WWE at its best.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I was saying, the sort of pageantry of it, and I think it does elevate the character. I think a lot of times when people are talking, they are debating that the Undertaker is the GOAT thing. I think they're talking about the character, and I think the points that people make in order to elevate him to number one in their minds is he might be the best character ever. Longevity wise, storylines wise, it's kind of difficult to argue that he isn't. But I think when you and I sort of have these, dissections and debates, I think a lot of it factors in with, the wrestlers themselves, the stuff that they did and when they did it. And, again, I saying that Undertaker had great partners, especially during the run we're talking about right now, like leading up to Shawn Michaels, and I want to dedicate more time to that later. But when he tosses Mankind off the top of the cell, everybody that's a Mankind match to most people, right? Like, it's like, oh, wow, this guy will fucking do anything. Like, this guy will literally do anything. Like, he's out of his mind. So people start to become huge Mick Foley fans, right? But Taker does a great job in that, of really fucking him up and really selling it. You know what I mean? Like, really, really selling it. Like, when he tosses him, it's with this sort of cold abandon with that he acts it, and this is a big stunt. This is I think at that time, I think that's the highest anybody had dropped. I think people have gone higher since, but it was shocking. It was the toss heard around the world at the time. And yeah, people can rightly give credit to, I think, Mankind in that match, but I mean, Taker, I think, does a great job of selling it. I think when he has a dance partner, like the Mick Foleys of the world, I mean, it's you get, or I should say Mankind's of the world, you get magic, and I think he plays a big part in that because,
it's
because of the pageantry of it. Yeah. The theatrics of it. Yeah.
Exactly. Like, to know, when you're watching that, where, I was 10 years old, you were 9 at that time, right? You just instantly went, I think he's dead.
Yeah. Right. I mean, it's with one of those moments where you're like, did this go wrong?
And you can just hear JR yelling, oh my God, that killed him.
Yeah. Yeah. That man is split in half. I'm sure of it.
Yeah. And then you just see Taker just peeking over the edge and not even, not flinching. He's like, I meant to kill him.
Yeah. And staying in character. Yeah.
Yeah. That, now all these years later, we know that move was not cleared by anybody. That was not discussed. And for him to do that and then do all the things that he did in that match, I mean, this is getting a little bit too in the weeds, but he had a broken foot in that match. Everyone always talks about the fact that, Mick Foley almost died twice. Sure. And it's true. But Taker's climbing a cell with no holes in it to get up to the top, jumping from the top to the ring.
The roof of the cell wasn't doing great either with those two big guys up there. The roof of the cell is starting to fall apart as they're up there. And you're like, ugh. So that adds some kind of tension and realism to it, because it looked to me like it really was breaking. And they're like, there's a moment where they're like, and they kind of gingerly step off it.
That wasn't planned. He was not supposed to go through the cell.
Yeah. It's absolutely wild. And Mankind does get that credit, but at the same time, when you have a guy like Mankind and you're a real professional, and my guy Brett, he bangs this drum all the time. You don't hurt the other guy. Even, he's willing to do whatever. I would argue, I would criticize Rock more for how he kind of went over the top with Mankind and what he'd allow him to do. I think he took it too far, to be honest, because he's never going to say no to this stuff. But I think Taker kind of protected him in a weird way, because he is kind of a pro. He didn't let him die. I know he fucking threw him into a table, but he didn't let him die. He threw him in the right spot. So, you got to give him credit for being a consummate professional there. I mean, I know his injury record, and I mean that in the sense of injuring other people. I know it's not 100% clean, as you're want to point out, but I think I wouldn't say he was a dangerous wrestler.
No.
He wasn't Goldberg, he wasn't out there not knowing what he was doing. And I think you need a guy like that if you're going to perform stunts at that level, at that Mick Foley level, or at the, as we should, I think, move on to at the Shawn Michaels level. So I think we all know the 3 matches. Where do you put them, one on top of the other, and why? Is that a tough question? Have you not thought about that?
Yeah, well, I just think so. WrestleMania 25 is the greatest wrestling I think that I've seen, only because of, the wrestling was great, but also the theatrics and the fact that this is 12 years after they had their last match.
But wait, hold on. Catch me up, because I'm not as good with the actual names of the events. Is that the lawn dart over the fucking, over the ropes?
Yeah,
and the guy fucks it up and he he nearly dies and he has to keep the streak alive by getting up, basically.
But then after that, where he almost breaks his neck, they go for another 18 minutes. And that's when it actually picks up, right? So I think that's a true testament to both of them. Just the fact that, 12 years later, there was so much interest in those two meeting for the first time at WrestleMania, and that they did it. It wasn't just two 45-year-olds out there just because their names stole the show.
Yeah, I mean, that was a half-hour match, all in. And these guys are old as fuck, and they're doing crazy stuff. And I agree with you. It is a testament to both of them that they were still doing it at that level, especially Shawn, to be honest with you, with the injuries that he had. I don't think he enjoyed, there's a million interviews out there too of him witnessing Taker take that fall. and being like, "Oh, dude, no, not that." You know, like, dear God, are you
Right.
okay?
Right.
Like, because of him of all people, he knows, you know.
I think Hell in a Cell is number 2, right? It's the first Hell in a Cell. I think the fact that main evented a show and neither of those men were champion, and you had the introduction of Kane.
Yeah, monstrous Kane comes out with Paul Bearer, which gives Shawn Michaels the chance to crawl out of a pool of his own blood and escape this beatdown that he'd be receiving. And it's the first ever Hell in a Cell. It might still be the best ever Hell in a Cell. Like, it could possibly be. And it's because it's an amazing match between those two. But yeah, continue.
And then I think the third is 26, Shawn's last match. It's really hard to even come close to following up, the match like you had the year before. Rock and Hogan tried to do it after their 2002 match with No Way Out 2003. It was awful. Like, I recommend that you never watch that. But 26 for what it was really good, and the storytelling was again on point. The fact that Taker could have put him out but didn't want to, and then Michael slaps him across the face. Taker does his little sign and really puts a tombstone down. I mean, that is storytelling in the ring at its best too. Like, they knew, those two wrestlers or sports entertainment humans knew how to elicit a response from the audience by doing not a lot, like just the facial expressions. Like in WrestleMania 25, Taker does the tombstone for the first time ever, crosses the thing, does the hair flip, and Shawn kicked out. And the look on Taker's face, I mean, it told you, this has never happened before. I don't know if I could beat him.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was peak storytelling in the sense that they had built not only Taker's character, but also that move. They had built that move into, once this happens, it's over. And they really, really punched that home. Every single time it happens, he'd wrap the arms across the chest, like in a coffin. He'd pin him. That's it. It's lights out. And they did some cool stuff with that move over the years. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, when Kane does it to him.
Yep.
That's a whole crazy moment where you're like, not his own move. But I agree. I think that's actually ironically, Shawn kicking out of it, I think that's the highlight for the move itself, because I think it's congruent and it's convalescent with the peak of Shawn Michaels, like him at this crazy level of performance, and adding to this narrative that, like, he's the one man Taker can't kill, like he's his enemy, because they're smart about it. They see the kind of matches they have. They see the way that they work together in the ring, which I think you're absolutely right to touch on that. How they were with each other, how they bounced off each other, I thought was great. I think Shawn did a lot to elevate Taker in those moments. And I think in the kind of the acting part of it, and I think Taker did a lot to really show off Shawn's moves.
Yep. In
the actual technical part of it. And I think, to me, that is my number one between those two, because I think it's got everything that Taker and Shawn always brought to the table. It's got the whole thing, the whole package in there, because every element that we just discussed at length is there in a huge way. Like, it shows their rivalry. It shows why it works. The acting's on point. The moves are on point, and nobody was harmed in the making of this of this great match, right? So, yeah, I really do think that they elevate each other. I think there's a reason why both of them are on both of our lists, maybe in different spots, but they both kind of have to be. And a lot of it's sort of because of each other. Let me ask you this, sort of moving on to more pressing topics as far as like his retirement goes. Do you think that his first retirement, quote unquote, in 2013 or whatever it was, do you think that his legacy might have been in better shape had he stopped wrestling around 2013, 2014?
Do you mean the streak? Is that what you're asking me?
Well, the streak ends, right? The fact that the streak ends in, I think, 2014, right?
Yeah.
If he retires before that, is that better? Is that better for the legacy of that happening from WrestleMania? Say he beats CM Punk at WrestleMania 29, right?
Yeah.
And then he just walks away into the sunset. There's that Shane McMahon thing never happens. That weird match. The streak doesn't end. He just had a lot. I thought there was a lot of stuttering after that. Like there was a lot of kind of stop start. It just didn't feel like the same career anymore after that point. And I know he wanted that kind of perfect ending, which to me would have been Shawn coming out of retirement and giving him the retirement match that he gave Shawn, to be honest with you, which it doesn't seem like that's on the cards anymore.
They tried that.
Well, they're a million, right? Like it's at this point. So, but like, do you think that there was any shine taken off his career after that, after the streak ended and he couldn't quite find his like perfect retirement match in that era?
So I think that when the fans talk about this, right, it's a lot of the hindsight is 2020 because in the moment, when you think about it, 23 has a great match with Batista, 24 has a great match with Edge, 25, 26 with Shawn, 27, 28 with Triple H, with that Hell in a Cell at 28 being an all-time classic.
And he's 20-0 at this point.
Yeah, has a great match with CM Punk. So you think, okay, this guy can still just show up once a year and he can do it. And based on the matches that he had with Brock before 30 and even after 30, my gut is if he wasn't severely concussed in that match, it would have been a great match. And it would have been something where he could have felt like he could have walked away because he then elevated a guy that maybe didn't need to be elevated. But in reality, 48-year-old Undertaker is not beating Brock Lesnar in anything. I don't care if it's rock, paper, scissors, or if it's a wrestling match.
I mean, Brock Lesnar was still competing in the and competing successfully in the UFC at this point. You know, he was showing off like some true athletic, cojones in another sport. So I think it was unrealistic. But like, just stop then. Right? Just stop. You don't have to do it. Just keep the streak alive.
You ever seen The Wrestler? The movie with Mickey Rourke? I mean, there's a lot of parallels there. And then I think even Stone Cold says in The Last Ride, it's like riding the edge of riding the tip of a lightning bolt. And like there's something about walking up and hearing 30,000 people scream for your entrance. And I do think that Shawn's last match, and then consequently the last match that they had all three of them in the Hell in a Cell where Shawn was the referee. I think after Brock, he was chasing that. And there just weren't those guys left until he came up against AJ Styles and he was sent off the way that he should have been sent off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think they got it right in the end. In the very end. And I want you to talk about that too, like what your sort of impressions were of that, the kind of retirement go around. They gave him the sort of the Kobe treatment, in wrestling terms. And I think to sort of see him say, okay, like the character's laid to rest. I think I finally got that retirement that I think I deserved. It wasn't as, like you said, I mean, there really just wasn't anyone to give him that level of send off that he gave Shawn, right? Like there just wasn't anyone to do that for him, which, I mean, that's more, I think, of a credit to how good that match was, how good those two guys were together. Like we discussed, but he went out finally sort of the way he wanted. The character's laid to rest. He's talking sort of like as himself to all these people that sort of made his career what it was. There's a little bit of revisionist history in it, as there is when like sort of, whenever you get this kind of lap of honor, I think that sort of happens. So what was your impression of like that, the kind of ceremony and like how it all came to an end? Like, did you like it? Were you satisfied with it? Because it doesn't seem like you thought it went on for too long. I thought maybe it went on for a little bit too long, but.
Oh, you mean his TED Talk?
No, I mean his career. I mean, quite frankly, I think that there was like, we're talking about the stops. Yeah, I do want to hear about that, but we're talking about the stop-start nature from 2013, 2014 onward. When he gets the AJ Styles match, I do agree with you that is the best match he's had in years, and the only one that would have probably made sense for him to be his retirement match, like the way he wanted to go out. But before that, there was just, there's a lot of stuff, stop-start. What do you think? In the end, were you satisfied? Were you left with like feeling like you wanted more, like you wanted less? And then, like I'd love to know what your feelings were about the sort of long one-on-one interviews that he was conducting with all the people sitting in the stands as he went around. So
this is kind of like a double-edged answer. I'm glad that he got the ending that he deserved. I don't think it hurts him because of how much equity he built up with everyone, with that character. I am sad that it took so long, right? I mean, you think about 2014, he's gone, all of it. He comes back. Credit to Bray Wyatt for promoting a WrestleMania match without Taker ever showing up on a Raw beforehand. That match wasn't good. It was fine. It wasn't awful.
Can't go out like that, though.
Yeah, Shane match, can't go out that way.
Roman Reigns, yeah. No.
I mean, you need to know, and that's when it looks like the most like the wrestler to me. Is Like he looked like he says it in the documentary. He looked like Fat Elvis. But he was out there. He couldn't do any of the things that he needed to do. But then you see him a year later against Cena.
Yeah.
Had they given that 15, 20 minutes, I think he would have hung it up there. And he should have, because he looked great. He looked excellent in that match. And then you have some other examples where they did bring up, they did bring back Shawn for DX versus the Brothers of Destruction.
Yeah.
They probably should have told him before he shaved his head. But, Kane gets hurt in that match. Triple H tears his tricep. And then you get a guy with Shawn who hasn't been in the ring in 8 years against a beaten down, broken Taker. Like, what can you do?
Right. You can't get back. You can't get back to that level. He can't pay him back at that point.
No.
It's not physically possible for anybody.
I mean, if you watch that match, and I say if you watch it, because if you really are having a really good day and want to bring it down, watch it, because you see Shawn, he's the only one in there trying. I mean, he had been in the ring for 8 years, and he does a moonsault off the top rope to the outside, and
he only had one. He only had one speed. I think that I think a lot of what I like about Shawn Michaels is like he only knew one way to do it. And I think that it's why he probably has a really tough time getting from his bed to his shower in the morning, but it's also why he had probably the longest prime of anybody. He kept his prime alive after all the next stuff by having classic matches after that. So I think that there's going to be some contrast if you have a bunch of like old dudes in there. But you're right. He did go and do the work, and he did come back, and I think he had a great match against Cena. To your point, I think if they had to let it go a certain amount of time, I think it would have been a little bit more appropriate. But what about the AJ Styles match? Like, how do you feel about that? Do you think Cena would have been a better way for him to go out, or do you think that was just scripted the right way?
I think that Undertaker was saved, and I don't mean to cause controversy here, but I think the fact that that the pandemic had just started and fans were not available, I think that played to a lot of Taker's strengths at that time, because he could still do all of the brawling. He's a great trash talker, as you can see that match. But he didn't have to go out there in front of 80,000 people and potentially put on a 20-minute shitty match. They filmed it, and I think in that match, it told the story of the Dead Man, the American Badass, Big Evil, and you had a guy like AJ who was willing to do what Shawn did in 98 and 97, just throw himself around and make Taker look good. So I thought that was the perfect way to end the career. I do.
You don't think a real live match was sort of owed to his career, though? Like the way that, like you said, he looked great in the Cena match. It wouldn't have been a terrible note to go out on.
That was a 7-minute match.
Yeah, sure. But I mean, he looked good.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Do people remember that? Do people it's just like, if you can still just play some highlights from it as opposed to making it work in the pandemic, do you think that takes some shine off it or not?
Well, I think if you look back at Taker, right, you talk about his great moments and the things that stick out to you when you think about him. I always think about, to your point, the casket match with Yokozuna, and then they show him on the old bricks Titantron, right? That's a moment. That's theatrics. You think about Buried Alive. You think about when he put Stone Cold on the cross in the Ministry of Darkness. So all those effects, I think, have always been a part of his career. And to be able to look tough, look like a badass, and still have all of those things in a really unique way. I mean, because there was another cinematic match on that card, the Bray Wyatt's Funhouse, which with Cena, which was entertaining, but in all the wrong ways.
Mm-hmm.
If you watch Taker and AJ's match, you are thoroughly entertained.
Are you not entertained? I just watched Gladiator the other day. So good.
Did he deserve the roar of 80,000 people? Yes,
definitely, of course.
But I think that there's always that question of what happens if something goes wrong in one of those situations, and now they're just clapping because his name is the Undertaker, not because of what actually happened in the ring.
And how many more chances do you get after that? How many more tries, how many more bites of the apple do you get before you got to hang it up on something shitty because you're a billion years old?
He got a standing ovation after the Roman Reigns match, and that was a terrible match.
Yeah, he's always going to, though, right? He's he's the most cemented fan favorite that there ever was. There's when he was fighting in that era from probably 2015 to 2020, post streak, he was fighting legends matches. You know what I mean? Like that was sort of a retirement tour, you know, for better or for worse during that time, because once the streak's over, I mean, you're not building any new narratives at this point. You're just playing off what's already been established with the Undertaker, which is you can establish quite a bit. Quite a bit's been established, and people fucking love him. So you can drop him in to other storylines and enhance those storylines. You can drop him into other matches and enhance those matches just by the presence of him being there. And he earned that clout. You know, I think he earned that. But yeah, I agree. I think what you're kind of getting to is it would have gotten sadder and sadder as time went on if he hadn't hung it up at the time. But let's talk about his, as you so eloquently described, his TED Talk at the end. I mean, we're laughing, but I mean, he deserves his little lap of honor, right? Yes. I mean, based on everything that we're talking about, he deserves to sort of take in the moment as he sees fit. What did you think about the stuff he was saying? I thought it was kind of funny that he finds it difficult to not like go kind of in and out of character when he's on the mic, you know, because he's like, that's his comfort zone. But what did you think? Like, I thought he had a cool moment with Stone Cold. A lot of people were saying it was a little tacky, but I thought that was a genuine moment. I think he was really paying him a compliment as a professional. So talk to me about how you were feeling. I mean, were you 10 years old, sitting in your bedroom again, like watching The Undertaker ride off into the sunset?
Oh yeah. I mean, so everything that I just said about that AJ match is true, but to have a 30-year career, your last match being in front of nobody, you're announcing that your retirement, you know, 30 years after you show up in Survivor Series in front of nobody, then if you get to be near your home, like in your home state with 100,000 people, 20,000 people there at the Hall of Fame, you can do whatever you want. And I love the nods to Yoko. I loved, you know, we looked at Shawn and Triple H and said, you know, thank you. It's not a surprise to me that he's a really good speaker, right? Like he can, it's not one of his deficiencies. Like most big men can't do that.
Right.
I thought he did a great job summing everything up. And then, you know, being the old worker that he is at the end, he's, you know, never say never. And it, with the hat on, but please, like, Mark Calloway, please say never.
Yeah, he's too old. He's too old. It's not.
I also really enjoyed at WrestleMania when, you know, both nights, but night one, when his music hit and they introduced the Hall of Fame, and like you actually had 60,000 people on their feet. He did deserve that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, in that moment we were all back at that Yokozuna match, you know, when he comes up on the TV and like with the red background and you hear that music and you're like, oh man, this guy's here to stay.
That haunted me, by the way, for such a long time.
Oh, dude, yeah. He was scary when you were a kid. He was like full on like horror movie scary. Like he was like, look at this lurking giant. And so was like the whole Paul Bearer thing. I mean, yeah, maybe it looks silly when you're looking back on it now. It, you know, through the lens of like the 2022, you know, the world is fucked and everything is crazy. But when you're 10 and you're watching that, like you're alive, you know, like you're afraid for your life for this guy.
And he's dead.
And he's, yeah, exactly. You know, you're with him, you know, that like for better or for worse, I say this to you guys about Tom Brady for, you know, for better or for worse, that guy's been around most of my life, you know, and doing stuff in the sport most of my life. Like since I gained consciousness pretty much onward, the Undertaker's been there or thereabouts doing something, you know, in wrestling, like having these moments across, like you said at the very start of this show, across multiple eras. No one else can match that. Nobody else can match career longevity. And I think, you know, you can say there's some people out there that might say like, oh, well, that's why he gets the credit. It's just that career longevity. And I think that's okay. You know, if that's the case. I think that's really cool and impressive that he did that, you know?
I mean, there have been people that have been around for a long time that are terrible, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, when you just think about it in this sense, if you were, let's say, there's a chance there was a 40-year-old dad with his 10-year-old son at Survivor Series 1990, and that same person was now a 70-year-old grandfather with his 30-year-old son or 40-year-old son and his 10-year-old grandson, all looking at the same guy.
Right.
Like he carried that company through so much. Like before there was Austin, there was always Taker. You know, Jim Ross used to always say he's the conscience of WWE. And he was the reason why people like the back didn't fall apart. And he had shitty storyline after shitty storyline, but he never wavered. And he also, I know that we'll wrap up soon, I'm sure, but I can go on for hours about this.
Well, I mean, this is actually what I wanted to talk to you about. So I'm curious to hear what you have to say. That was going to be the thing I wanted to sort of end on, is the idea of a World Wrestling Organization without the Undertaker, the idea of who he was in the locker room, who he was in the back room, and the sort of amount of times he kept what could very easily have fallen apart completely at the seams. He seems to keep it together from all the stories that you hear about what he was like as the back room, the locker room leader. And what does it look like going forward in an era without him, because we haven't had to imagine it for so long. So yeah, this is all what I want to hear. I want to hear what you have to say about this.
Yeah. So I think, when he comes into WWE, the locker room leaders at the time were Hogan, Andre, Savage, and they all age out. And now but he worked with them. So like he was there to experience that. Right. And then now there's the new generation where it's him, Kevin Nash, Bret Hart, Shawn, and then it's Austin Rock. But there's always that guy that's been there with the old man, as he calls him, since 1990. And, whether it was having to face an imposter Undertaker at SummerSlam, and the guy, at that point wasn't a great worker. I'm talking about the imposter, to Giant Gonzalez, to King Kong Bundy, who was 10 years past his prime. He kept showing up. And then when you go into 2002 and he's been, the American Badass for 2 years at that point, which by the way, that just shows you how much he cared about the business and how much he respected the fans, because Hogan did the same thing for 20 years and only changed because he smelled money.
It didn't really work either with the Hollywood Hulk Hogan stuff. That didn't even really work.
But it caused a pretty big thing, right? Like that,
sure.
The NWO, but I would say Taker wasn't asked to change his character, but knew that it needed to, or he was just going to get lost in the shuffle. He did it. And then he went back to it in 2004. But you think about the fact that you have a guy that worked with Hogan, was around Andre, worked with Warrior, Savage, that's now working with Cena, Orton, Roman. So I think it's scary to think that he's no longer in the locker room, but in reality, he hasn't been a locker room leader since 2013. He hasn't been traveling with them. Now, when he shows up, he'll still command the same respect. But I think, maybe I'm giving him too much credit for being selfless. Maybe one of the reasons that he held on for so long is that he wanted there to be people there that were now locker room leaders that worked with him and saw the way that it was supposed to be done. But the WWE would probably not be around in its current form if it weren't for the Undertaker. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think that there's very easy lines to draw from moments. I mean, it's not as if you're dealing with a bunch of accountants back there either. I think people could maybe come back and say like, well, yeah, he oversaw all these eras as the quote unquote locker room leader, but like a lot of shit happened back there too. A lot of real stuff, like a lot of stuff that wasn't, works. And it's like, I think, you're dealing with a bunch of fucking madmen back there. It's like, you're
right.
herding cats at the end of the day. So I think what he did was he kept a baseline, and eventually he sort of became the example. And I think that there's nobody, to your point, there's nobody coming up in wrestling that's going to come in and say, who's that guy? You know what I mean? Like you
right.
sort of need that. I don't think he ever sort of aged into being a mascot or anything along those lines. I still think he had things to say, and I think people listened to him when he talked, but I think he grew into that role too, which I think you were getting at, coming from the Hogan era. And then, eventually even facing off against Hollywood Hulk Hogan and sort of working through those moments, and everything coming full circle, having that through line, I think is so beneficial to wrestling across those years. Like you can point to every era, and the Undertaker probably has a great match in there.
I mean, you think about it like this, right? In his first title win, he beat Hogan in 1991. Mm-hmm. Hogan then leaves like a year or two later, and he goes off to WCW to try and take Vince down. And in his first title match as the undisputed champion in 2002, who does he go up against? Taker, the guy that never left. It's still here.
The company man. But he really was that. That's not even part of the character. He really was that. Like, I think you're to your point.
Yeah, I think he's just loyal. Now, loyal to a fault. Vince is what he is. But when it comes to that character was Vince's idea. But I'd say 9 out of 10 people would have taken that gimmick and run into the ground within a year, and Taker extended it for 30.
Yeah. Yeah, that gimmick too. It's not as if he ever... we talk at length on this show about wrestlers losing their way when they turn heel or when they change their characters. Like, it's usually, I would say not even often, I would say usually the kiss of death to a big name wrestler to switch in the wrong way, right? And I think that it being his idea saved him a little bit, him sort of moving organically. I think he did a really good job of recognizing what the brand was when he did the American Badass, and like what we were all like in 2002. You know what I mean? Like, right. This is the shit that we were into. Like, everybody was wearing Carpenter jeans and listening to tracks. You know what I mean? Like, it just made sense. Like, and I think to read the like as a sociologist, like to sort of read society like that and be like, okay, I can make a new character, but I'm going to put a lot of thought into it, and I'm going to be a reflection of the society we're sort of in right now, because he still needs to fit this, and this criteria in order for me to be able to do it, for Taker to be able to sort of be malleable through those things, but also for it to work. Like when Brett turned heel, it didn't make any sense. It didn't make any sense.
He didn't want to.
He didn't want to do it, so he didn't put enough thought into it, and it ended up just wrecking the Hitman character essentially, and that being sort of the end of Brett, right? Where you've seen it happen to. It seems you seem to think the Hollywood Hulk Hogan thing worked monetarily. Maybe it did. I don't know the numbers, but it annoyed me when it happened, because to me it was like, come on, it's like that's the great American hero. That's the good guy. That's the stay in school kids guy. That right. Doesn't make any sense. Like, I hate this. Maybe that's me. Maybe that's nostalgia. But when Taker did it, I think he does it seamlessly, because I think we kind of got to the bottom of it. Was Taker the best character ever? Probably. Was he the best at what you described, the theatrics of it? Quite possibly he was. I think that he makes number one on some lists, maybe not the overall GOAT for us, maybe for other people. And it would make sense to me why he would, but I think on certain criteria, I think he's number one with a bullet. And I think there's certain things that you just sort of can't take from him. And I think we're all grateful to have had him, to be quite honest with you. I think that there's stuff you can say, there's negatives that you can say, but I'm just happy he was here overall, and I'm sad to see him go. It makes me feel like I'm getting old.
From a performance standpoint, like, I don't think there's not very much that you can say negative about him, right? Now, he had bad matches, sure, but I mean, he's not a guy that could have a good match with the broomstick. He's not a Brett, he's not a Shawn, he's not an AJ, right? But I mean, you look at the overall content of his work. 2002 when he at WrestleMania when he fights Flair was not Ric Flair.
I feel like this happened to Undertaker all the time, like what you're describing. I feel like it happened to him so often.
That were not as confident as they once were. Mm-hmm. And then he pulled a great match out of them.
Right. I think he was a good caretaker wrestler in that sense. Like, I think he was able to sort of be like, all right, come on, we're going to go through the beats here. I got you, Right. And, that respect wasn't always shown to him by others in the ring. Like, he should never have been in the ring with guys like the Great Khali. But I can go on. I would just say wrestling is a really hard business to stay in, and both mentally, physically, whatever it might be. And he got in when people were still doing all the crazy shit behind the scenes. And he's still there. He's still around. And he made it. And now he's, helping out at the Performance Center. I think, I just think longevity-wise, there's never going to be another run like him. There's never going to be someone with such a sustained character, interest. And it felt when he retired, I've never felt older. Right.
We both bought houses. We're both married.
Yeah.
when a guy that we started watching when we were 3 hangs it up and we're 32 and 33, you're like, well, shit.
Yeah. I mean, what else is there to say? A guy that goes from matches in the early 90s against, Jimmy Snuka and Jake the Snake Roberts and Giant Gonzalez and the start of the streak all the way through like the Canes of the world. And then to finish it off with a match against CM Punk, who's like modern era, you know what I mean? Like full on modern era, still. And I think for that to be the streak, that by itself is a Hall of Fame career. And he did stuff before that and after that. So I credit to The Undertaker. We're sorry to see you go. I enjoyed your TED Talk. Taught me a lot. I think you taught us all a lot. I think you taught us all a lot about how to act in business, because if you take the Taker approach, you might have a long and illustrious career. So
he's terrible in business.
Is he really? I didn't know that.
Yeah,
did he invest poorly or something?
Yeah. He started like real estate places. They didn't really work out. But Undertaker, the character.
Oh my God. Like Trump steaks. This is not.
Well, these were real. But to button it up, though, like when you say you're sorry to see him go, I'll just add to that. I'm glad that you were able to see us. Sorry to see you go.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
This wasn't a post-mortem, induction. He deserves it. He deserves it.
Definitely. And I hope he has an ice bath installed in his house somewhere. He's going to need it. I hope he has a sauna or like one of those like cool your blood machines or whatever.
Hyperbaric chambers.
Now. Yeah, there you go. Whatever's trendy now. He's going to need all of it. And it's like a daily massage because there's no way that guy doesn't feel like shit right when he wakes up in the morning. But thank you for that, Undertaker. Thanks for feeling that way for the fans across such a long and illustrious career. All right, for KayFabe Critics, I am DK Sizzle, Dave Clarke, and for Mike Marcangelo, who did all the heavy lifting on this show as usual. I say thank you for listening and good night.
Welcome, explorers of the human experience. This is Let's Talk Soul, and I'm your host, Claudia Monticelli. We're not afraid of the great mysteries of existence here. Soul versus consciousness, we're on it. Spirituality versus science, we've got that covered too. Join us in navigating these profound topics with wisdom, curiosity, and a dash of audacity. Whether you're a spiritual veteran or just starting your journey, Let's Talk Soul is your passport to the unknown. Let's Talk Soul, diving into the depths of the human spirit. Subscribe now wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey there, fabulous souls. I'm Stephanie Baklaan.
And I'm Eden Alpert.
And we're the hosts of the brand new podcast, Unapologetically Fab.
Get ready to join us on an amazing and real journey as we dive into life after 40 and own it.
We're all about changing the narrative, leaning into who you are, and living a life by your own design.
Join us as we embrace life unapologetically and redefine success.
This is Unapologetically Fab,
an Electric Cast production.
See you there.
Electric Cast.